Yeah, put it there, Aaron. Hurry up, because I'm in a meeting, so I need you to. Thank you. Close that. Come back here and close. Aaron, come back here and close this door.
Okay, can anyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Brazo, and I'm the Director of External Affairs at ASVC. I would like to welcome everyone formally to the Constitution Day webinar. We are all excited to begin, but first, we would like to introduce and thank the planning groups, the ASVC board, and the Political Science Club. They've done an excellent job in creating, organizing, and formatting the presentation ready for everyone today. Without further ado, we would like to introduce President Hoffman, Kim Hoffman, who will say a few welcoming words, and Professor Callahan, who will be our facilitator presenting today's speakers. President Hoffman?
Yes, thank you so much, Colin. I appreciate the introduction. Like Colin said, I am so happy that you were able to take time out of your day today to attend our Constitution Day celebration. I really want to give a special thanks to ASVC for your organization of this and the faculty and others involved. I know it takes time to plan these events, but they're important in our college that we continue to proceed in this manner as we move forward through this COVID situation. So I applaud you on your efforts here. The Constitution, as you know, describes our federal structure. And it is really important today to also remind us of our civic obligation to vote. We are at a pivotal time in America, and there's a lot of divisiveness in our country right now. So I'm hoping through the voting and through this process, we will get through on the other end and coalesce together, because it's really important during this tumultuous time. So I encourage you to vote. Thank you for attending today and learning more about our Constitution. And I also want to encourage you to make sure that while in voting in your civic obligation is important, make sure that you are an informed voter, that you do the research needed in order to make sure that you are voting for the things that you believe in and what their impact is going to be on our society. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to the rest of the celebration today.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Professor Kenyon Callahan. I teach political science here at VC's College here in Ventura. Today I will be moderating, so I'm not going to do a lot of talking. I just want to kind of just talk about how important the Constitution of the United States is to our society and to us. It is by far the most important document that we look to in all legal matters of this nation. So 9 people control pretty much how they interpret the Constitution. And so it's important. It's also important to, as President Hoffman said, is to vote. We can't complain if we don't vote, right? And so as I prepare to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon, I just want you guys to all be aware that November 3rd is the election day. It's important that you do your absentee ballots. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Professor Gamboa, Native American, who's going to talk about the Native American influence on the Constitution. Professor Gamboa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
And can I share my screen?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to make you the co-host, or the host, if you can just pass back those capabilities when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, are you guys taking care of that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rubalisa.
Rubicella. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. So thank you. Thank you all for coming. And I am addressing a specific topic here that's the influence of Native Americans on the Constitution. So before I begin, I'm going to give you a quote from the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving Address. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. So with that, I would like to start with this introduction here of the Great Law of Peace. So before we had the Constitution, before we have a declaration, we have the Great Law of Peace. So many years before the American Constitution and its declaration, this Great Law of Peace was initiated by the Iroquois Confederacy. So who are the Iroquois Confederacy? I need to do an introduction because this is not normally taught. So we're looking at upstate New York, and we're looking at 5 groups, 5 nations here that came together to create the first and oldest democracy that we have in what we now call the United States. And so in this area, in this region, what was recognized is this group and its foundation to this democracy, and also the foundation to the ideas that we have within this Constitution. Each tribe settling around the Finger Lake region. And then later there would be a 6th that would be introduced to the Confederacy, and not until 1722. So I want to make sure that you all understand that the influence that this nation has as one of the first democratic nations had contact with Europeans from France first, and where there is a huge influence on Enlightenment period. That is also something that is being introduced here as well. So when we look at who these people are, as indigenous populations who are still alive and thriving and still have a great nation and still have this confederacy, we identify them as Haudenosaunee. So just to be politically correct, most indigenous groups have had their names changed. And so they are not identified as Iroquois but Haudenosaunee. And Haudenosaunee is in reference to the way that they lived, and also encompasses the Great Law of Peace and their governing body, which is this oval shape that resembles where they lived. So with the 5 nations here, we can see how their home would be replicated in the long house that they lived in. And so the idea of their constitution, of their laws and their governing body actually goes back to the way of life and living. And so the name refers to them as Haudenosaunee, their longhouse, and their confederate alliances among the people and their neighbors. So these ideas, the name is given, the Iroquois, just so you know, the Iroquois is a term, a name that's given by an enemy. So the French come in, they make contact with Native people and say, hey, who are those people across the lake? Well, those are people we've been warring with, those are our enemies. And so that's where we get the misconception of the name. In case you were wondering, they did not call themselves the Snake People. And the French obviously had a language to add to that, to add the ois. So they do refer to themselves as the Ankwe Hangwe, which simply means humans, the people. And usually that is a reference, an ancient term that Native people use, is the people. So the beginning of our documents and as we the people is very significant as being indigenous as well. So the democracy that we see and the Great Law of Peace, before the ideas of inalienable rights, liberty, and democracy were strung together with words, they were strung together with wampum. This is what we're seeing here. This is the Great Law of Peace of the wampum belt strung with shells. And these wampum belts are very significant, and our founding fathers understood its significance because they also recreate wampum belts in these, in the treaty making. So they're beads made of shells, mollusk, whelk shells, and what they are is going back to indigenous concepts of identity, duality, light, darkness, and symbolisms in oral tradition. So the oral telling of stories. There's a huge significance within our country and what's happened with wampum belts and of the treaty making. And you can see this image here of all of these negotiations that have happened with as a sovereign nation, as working with another democracy. And so the treaty making is in reference to the wampum belt, signifies the importance of that and remembering of that. And it is remembered today. We still have a recognition of these wampum belts. On the left is the Great Law of Peace that is a replica. In the middle is negotiations and treaty making and peacemaking with the Dutch. And the far right is the one that we made with George Washington, one of the founding fathers here. So when we look at that one, it's very significant to recognize how our founding fathers were in recognition of this democracy that existed before we have our own. And so we have the 13 nations here that George Washington asked for this to be made so that they could be connected with that democratic nation as well as the Haudenosaunee. And so it establishes the peace, establishes the friendship. These are all the concepts that the founding fathers understood that this nation had. And it also establishes the land rights, restoring those land rights within that New York state. When we recognize this, we also recognize the sovereignty, we recognize the democracy that existed there before. And so when we look at this democracy and we look at the Haudenosaunee, what we're seeing is an oral tradition, an oral statement of 117 articles in their constitution. And these are recognized every time a wampum belt is picked up. And so it is, very significant to remember these things. And this can be debated as far as how far back we can go. There's scholars that will say 1190, and then there's others that will say 1500. But what has been agreed is that it is before you have our nation having these discussions about freedom and democracy. And so when we look at the story, the historical story of this, there's a prophet involved, there's a vision involved, and there's a person who's coming around and trying to create peace where there's war. And this is a warring nation. And so you have ambassadors that are working, and Hiawatha is introduced as an ambassador that wants to end war. You also have Jigonsase, a female ambassador. And one thing to recognize is the matrilineal societies where women played a huge role in this democracy society. So when we look at the contributions, the idea of personal liberty, leaders as servants of their people and not as their masters, that was significantly taken from what the Haudenosaunee upheld. And so the freedom of expression of political and religious matters, and also forbidding any unauthorized entry into the homes. These are all part of the articles of the Great Law of Peace. When we look at the contributions of the Haudenosaunee as far as the separation of powers, we can see that mimicked almost identically with the Haudenosaunee and our Constitution, the bicameral structure, the presiding chief, the Women Council that the Haudenosaunee had turning into our Supreme Court. So when we further look at this, the US Constitution also has the veto power that is very much like the one established in the Great Law of Peace for making and approving laws and regulations. The firekeepers had the power to veto any decision that the lower levels made, just as the president does in our government. And so when we look at the founding fathers and the ideas that they had, and when we recognize them as founding fathers, we also need to recognize where they got these ideas and how we have our founding fathers who had relationships with the Haudenosaunee Nation and also read literature and books that were of their nation and were researching them and also directly making contact with that primary source in the ideas that we see now with our Constitution. So if you weren't aware, in 1987, the United States Senate passed a resolution acknowledging the historical debt that the United States owes to the Iroquois for their demonstration of enlightened democratic principles of government and their example of free association of independent Indian nations. The Iroquois model was there for the colonists to emulate, and also the orators and the ambassadors that were there to negotiate and to make sure that they understood this. When we look at this imagery, an important thing to do is that to get all of our learners. So I want to share a video. Let me, and I think I could do it on my end too, Libby. Okay. Can you see the, is it?
Major funding for engine.
Can you see it? No?
No.
Okay,
No.
That's. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
There is a story about a total eclipse at the time of its creation. And at that time, if a person was killed by someone in another clan or in another nation, then you were bound to go and kill or capture at least one person from the group that did that. Hiawatha was a skilled speech maker and so on. And he met up with Tiganawida, who some people say was a stutterer, but who had all these great ideas. And in one version of the story, they joined forces to try and stop the blood feuds. Then enunciated the Great Law. There is significant influence on the development of American government by Iroquois Haudenosaunee people. The direct influences are the idea of separation of powers, sovereignty in the people, that's we the people. Also, of course, the notion of federalism. Great Law of Peace, maintain peace within the Six Nations, but also developed a model for defense of the Six Nations from external powers. Speeches by Haudenosaunee and other Native American leaders about peace, about government, and so on. In one instance, in a treaty in Pennsylvania, an Iroquois chief said, you should think seriously about uniting along the lines like us. Then at the Albany Plan of Union in 1754, Franklin uses that as a model and develops the first plan for the union of the colonies. There is a group of Iroquois chiefs that come to Philadelphia, and they are actually sleeping on the second floor of Independence Hall. John Hancock is presiding over the Continental Congress at the time, and the Iroquois had been invited earlier to come down and view this new Continental Congress, and after looking for several weeks, they then make John Hancock the Great Tree. In 1785, when there's great frustration in the government and with the Articles of Confederation, three guys say, we need to go and examine the Iroquois more closely and then bring that back, and maybe we can construct a new constitution. Three guys are Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. Jefferson becomes the ambassador to the French, and with Monroe, Madison goes and he rejoins his friend the Grasshopper, who's an Oneida chief, who's known for a long time.
Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm getting all my visual learners here. So this is the last slide. I'd just like to bring it all back. When we do look at our seal, our seal is definitely also in the imagery of the Great Law of Peace and the Haudenosaunee. As we have at the beginning, at the top of our seal is Latin, is the e pluribus unum, out of many we are one, which is the same ideas and concepts that was shared that the Haudenosaunee state, one body, one head, and one heart. And when we look at the olive branch, the symbolism that it recognizes as a strong desire for peace is the exact same concept of the tree, which means the great peace. And when we look at the 13 arrows, the chiefs of the Haudenosaunee say each nation contributing one arrow, which we shall tie up together in one bundle, which when it is made in its great strength is also the eagle that is represented in the Haudenosaunee nation as one of the revered animals on top of the tree. So a great conversation piece. Every time you pull up $1, you have the great seal that's right there, and you can have this conversation at the dinner table. And thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Great job, Rubeselio. That was really good. Thank you. You told me stuff I did not even know. So I appreciate that. I got my little history lesson in for today on the Iroquois. So I think that's really good. Thank you so much. Libby, can you put the what you call it back up so I can introduce the next person?
Yes, Rubicella, can you give me the hosting capabilities?
It was really, really good. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Yeah, that was very, I want to take your class now.
How, how do I take off that hosting?
Press on my little square. There's a blue box in the right corner. If you press that box, it should say make host.
So yes, so while we and hey, Jesus said thank you, Rubsella. It was a great presentation. So we always want to give a shout out when people give shout outs. It's so important to let people know when we appreciate them for doing such a great job, and especially for things we don't know, you know. So that was really good. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that I did not print up the list of presenters today. So that's partly my fault. So
I'm sorry, I'm not finding where to.
Okay.
Somebody help me out here.
okay, she's a great professor. Yeah, Lisa Marie, she really is a great professor. And
Where do I go to change that?
so click on Libby's box. So where you see Libby's picture, click on her box and it should be,
Oh, her picture.
yeah, there you go. Click there.
Oh, make host. There we go.
Yeah, there.
Sorry.
Okay, there you go, Libby.
We're all
You're back.
learning. We're all
Libby's back. Okay, thank you very much. So our next guest is Eileen Remmers. Am I pronouncing that right? Eileen Remmers. She's going to do the preamble to the Constitution.
Yeah, so Eileen's computer just shut down on her,
Oh,
so we're
okay.
having some technical difficulties. So,
So
why don't
can
we go
I-
on
so
to
can-
Ken?
So can I skip
and
over
we'll
to
be
Kenneth?
back.
So
Yeah.
I'll skip over to Kenneth. Mariansky, who will talk about the US
close
Census
enough.
Bureau. Did I get that right, sir?
Mariansky, pretty close.
Mariansky, yes, I'm so sorry. So yes, welcome, Ken. Ken's gonna talk about the US Census Bureau, which is very important. So if you haven't done that this year yet, you need to do it. It's so important. So Ken, over to you, sir.
All right. What? I can't see myself. Do I look okay?
Yes, you do. Yes,
Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned that because several people have mentioned the duty to get out and vote, but it's also really important for us to get out and do the census. You know, in a way, you could argue that doing the census is even more important than voting because everyone is counted in the census, including people who can't vote, children, non-citizens. And so everyone has until September 30th to make sure that themselves and their families and all their friends are counted. It's really important. I'm really glad that you guys invited me to participate today because for the past year, I've been doing community outreach and publicity for the census. And it's really fun to just dive into the history of it, which I haven't done a lot of because you get so wrapped up in just the mechanics and operational side of things. So the census is really a linchpin of our democracy. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution says, quote, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the states according to their respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be made within every subsequent term of 10 years. And also talks about counting the whole number of free persons, including citizens, non-citizens, everyone. Now, there were two reasons behind that. The Revolutionary War was really expensive, so the census provided a way for the federal government to allocate the debt among the states. And this was, in world history, this was really nothing new. Other nations had used the type of census to tax their citizens. But what was really different about the census was the second part of it, which is that we wanted a truly representative governments where states got their seats in the House of Representatives based on population, and that would be determined by the census. This really was a radical idea back then. No other country had done that. And it actually, tying the two things together made sense because some people were worried that states might try to inflate their population to get more seats in the House. But then if they did that, they would have to pay more taxes to pay off the Revolutionary War. So the two things kind of canceled themselves out. So the first census was conducted in 1790. It was directed by Thomas Jefferson, who at that time was Secretary of State. Congress, under the Constitution, kind of set the parameters for it with passing the Census Act of 1790. And that, way back then, kind of established the concept of counting people at their usual residence, which has been a challenge this time around with COVID, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But that concept of usual residence is something that we use even today. The idea that we want to count you where you live and sleep most of the time. It's interesting that first census in 1790 was conducted by U.S. Marshals. They went around to homes and knocked on the door and got the information. And then they were required to post it publicly in 2 different places so people could walk by and review it for accuracy. Obviously, things are different now. The confidentiality of the census is required by law. It's very, very important. Any information you give to the census is locked and sealed for 72 years. Then it becomes public, and if you're into Ancestry.com, you can dive into all that data. It's fascinating. The idea being that most people, when they passed that rule, the average lifespan of an American was 72 years. So the idea was after 72 years, you'd be dead and we can release your information. And so that's where that comes from. Then the 14th Amendment kind of reiterated the fact that representatives shall be apportioned counting the whole number of persons in each state. Up until then, slaves were only counted as 3/5 of a person. So the 14th Amendment got rid of that. We counted slaves as whole people. But again, didn't matter if you were a citizen or a non-citizen, we were going to count everyone. So why is all of this important? Well, in addition to being a linchpin of our democracy, these figures are used for redistricting our state assembly and Senate seats. Our local school districts and city councils use that data, especially as they move to like district voting. And then at least $675 billion a year in federal funding is distributed using census data, everything from Medicaid to Pell Grants for college kids. And it's funny because this argument that we need to participate in the census to take advantage of the largesse of government, it's really kind of a relatively new argument. You know, in the old days, you just did the census because it was your civic duty. And I actually started adding that to my presentations because it's very important, all the federal funding and apportionment, but it's also required by law and it's your civic duty to be counted. So in normal times, the census is the largest federal peacetime effort. And it's probably even larger than that during COVID. We've had to make tons of adjustments. You know, counting college students is a good example. Normally we go out and we count the dormitories in person before spring break. But this year, all of the students were gone by spring break. So we really relied on the universities and colleges themselves to give us lists and demographic data on all the students living in the dorms. An even bigger problem were students who were living in off-campus housing. So we asked the universities to give us, to use their rosters to give us as much data as they could on students who were living off campus. Some of those students went home and then their parents counted them on their census. But we wanted to make sure that we counted them in the right place because it's not just counting everyone, it's counting people where they usually live because that's where the federal funding will flow. So if you're a college town and you have 20,000 students living in your town most of the year, you really deserve that federal funding for roads, for social services, And the fact that the student, goes home during the summer to Ventura doesn't mean that all that federal funding should flow back to Ventura. It really should flow to College Town. So anyway, we got most of the universities that gave us all this data. There were other adjustments. Normally we do count the homeless over 3 days at the end of March. We had to delay that because of the virus. We're actually doing that next week. It'll be one of our last major operations. We'll go to shelters and soup kitchens, to the river bottom, to any place where the homeless are living, and count them. Right now, we're slated to be finished by the end of the month. That date's in litigation. It could change, but we'll finish at the end of the month right now. We have to give the president the final numbers by the end of the year. Our goal is to count 99% of the households or greater. We've always met that goal. The households that we can't reach, we'll use administrative records. We'll talk to neighbors. We'll do something called imputation, which is where you look at the characteristics of the neighborhood, you take what data you have on the property, and then you try to figure out who lives there. We're required by law to give all of this data to the states by the end of next March so they can redistrict. And then after that, we'll start releasing a ton of stuff publicly to the media and such, different aspects of the data that we found. And then it's on to 2030. So right now we're in good shape. Right now, I looked at the numbers today, 93% of American households have been counted. In California, it's 95.4%. Some states are already at 99.5%, so we're looking good. And
Okay,
anyway,
good.
Thanks again for inviting me to this.
Well, we really appreciate you coming out and explaining that, because I don't think a lot of us really know all that. So thank you. I do have a couple of questions later when we go to the question area, so just so you be aware. The next person up was Eileen Rimmers. Is she back?
I'm back.
Okay. Well, and you have a different last. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Welcome.
No, McHenry is my maiden name. Sometimes that pops up. So it's
Okay.
Eileen McHenry Reimers.
Okay.
Hi, yes. Sorry for
Welcome.
the disruption. It would have been the perfect segue from Professor Gamboa into what I was going to talk about. Orion, would you put the screen up?
Yes, Libby, could you make me host? All righty.
Okay, I'm kind of new to this, using the computer for presentations. But my topic is dissecting the preamble to the Constitution. Next screen. Okay, a little about me, graduate of Southwestern School of Law, first female president of Southwestern. Constitutional law and a course in legislation were my favorite courses, and that's where I first studied the preamble. A couple of disclaimers. I am not a professor of law, history, or politics, and other than verifiable facts, much of what I say today is a lot of it's my personal opinion and my own interpretation, because there's not very much written about the preamble to the Constitution. There aren't case laws on it. So in fact, in the constitutional law book, it's not even in the index. It's just printed there once at the beginning of the Constitution. So I'm here as a fellow American, just one of approximately 330 million people, talking about what I believe is the mission statement of the United States of America. The legal definition of the preamble is that it's the introductory part of a statute or deed stating its purpose, aims, and justification. And again, my feeling is that everything in law and politics should be tested by the preamble to the Constitution. Let's see. Then who wrote the preamble? The Committee on Style at the Constitutional Convention, led by Governor Morris, in July of 1787, wrote it. It was presented to the Constitutional Convention on September 8th, and then it was enacted on September 17th, 1787. And that's why we're celebrating the anniversary of the 233rd anniversary of our preamble and our Constitution today. As you know, the Constitution has 7 articles and 27 amendments, but the preamble answers who is adopting it. It describes why it is being adopted, and it describes what is being adopted. There's 2 things that other speakers are discussing today: the census and the vote, and they're both very significant markers and measurements of what's gone on with our Constitution since it was enacted in 1787. The vote, it went from being less than 6% of the population being able to vote, but the census, if you use it as a marker, instead of counting that we're 233 years old, a better marker would be we're only 23 decades old, and so we're still a young nation in history. We look at very interesting listening to Professor Gamboa talking about the Great Law of Peace, and it went back to the 1100 years. And I did a little quick math, and that means there's over 80 decades. So that was a very mature and wise document if you go by how many years it existed. Population in 1790 was about 3.9 million. 700,000 were held as slaves, and not even in the census of 1790 were 150,000 Native Americans. And as I said, so only about 6% were eligible voters, because only white adult males who owned property could vote back then. So, and now, but in theory, the Constitution protects all persons within our borders. Let's see. So I believe that we the people are probably the 3 most important words in modern history. And it was, again, thanks to Professor Gamboa, I now have a new perspective on what those words mean. But just remember that as far as a written document, it was the first time that these words were used, and was totally unique in human history of governance. It was not a document written for or by princes or priests, not by corporations or churches, not by oligarchs or gods. It recognized the statement in statement in previous preamble to the Declaration of Independence, and that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. So who does the Constitution apply to? Well, in theory, as I said, it applies to everyone on US soil. In practice, it's much more complex and extreme. 2 examples, again, voting and the census. Voting only applies to a group, to citizens in our Constitution, whereas the census applies to every person. And in between that, you have green card holders, residents, visitors, undocumented immigrants, and prisoners. And only citizens have all the rights that are endowed on us in our Constitution. So what the preamble does not do, the preamble does not confer any power or right that has not been contemplated within the boundaries of the Constitution or the body of the Constitution. It does not define government powers or individual rights. What it does do is defines the objectives, goals, and purposes and intent. So now we've gone to my favorite screen, and as a English teacher, and so my BA was in English, I loved doing diagrams of sentences. I regret that they don't teach this anymore in the high schools or the grammar schools. But if you look at this diagram, you'll see that the main sentence of this 52-word long-running sentence, main part of the sentence is, "We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution." And then on the side there, you'll see all the goals and purposes of the Constitution. The first, in order to form a more perfect union. Obviously, our founders and the framers recognized that it was not perfect or even close to it, and that we would change and evolve the Constitution, and would change and evolve as time went on. And despite 233 years, it still has some serious flaws. For instance, what comes to my mind is the Electoral College, and I'm sure there's many others. The second goal, establish justice. Justice is defined as just behavior or treatment. In its broadest sense, the principle that people receive what they deserve is justice, righteousness, equitableness, moral righteousness. Numbers of example of justice, not just criminal justice or civil justice or justice in a legal setting, but these days we talk about environmental justice. We talk about racial justice, and I'm sure we can apply that term justice to a lot of other areas where we seek to have that fairness and moral righteousness. The next one is ensure domestic tranquility. Literally, it means peace at home. So we strive for, our Constitution strives to help us enact peace in our homes, our streets, and our nations, peace among the states, and to keep the peace and order within the borders of the United States. Provide for the common defense. Traditionally, the government will provide defense against attacks from outside countries or even internal groups. We now, I think, can include in providing for the common defense, defense against cyber attacks, defense against even intentional or unintentional attacks, such as COVID-19. I think that this is where I think the federal government has failed in not helping to defend us as a country against this attack that we're under biologically. Another thing that this clause does, of this phrase does, is enables us to have international agreements or treaties and appointment of ambassadors. So our Constitution will support the efforts that we make to resolve conflict through diplomacy and avoid having to defend ourselves militarily. Next one, another favorite of mine, promote the general welfare. Concerned of the government for the health, peace, morality, and safety of its people. For instance, I think this applies to healthcare, providing healthcare for the general population, housing, food, clean air, clean water. When the framers made this Constitution, we were pretty much able to do a lot of this stuff without government help. Everybody had a piece of land was available, there was resources available, we hadn't reached our manifest destiny, so we did not have to have government intervention as much as we do today. And but today, that goal is still there, and I think our government has got to help us meet it and provide for the general well-being or welfare. Finally, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. It implies an understanding that right from the creation, all of our Constitution, all men and women are to be treated equally, and that we're created equally and possess rights or blessings of liberty, which must be protected by law. The Constitution does not, and really cannot, name every single one because they're almost infinite, but some are found in the Bill of Rights, such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to vote, right to seek redress for grievances by the government. And who is it for? It's for future generations, to ourselves and our posterity, our children, our grandchildren, and everyone born after us. So it goes full circle. We started with we the people as we understood it in 1787. We're only 6% of the population. We're officially recognized as having the protections of and the benefits of our Constitution. And now we're in a place where we, at least in theory, visualize that this the blessings of liberty are for all of us, everyone now and into the future. And then as I said, this was kind of a split second. So what we've accomplished by this is ordaining and establishing a constitution. The process is complete. Not only is the document in order and an order of law, but it's set as a foundation for the future. And a nation has been created, which is of, by, and for the people. So I challenge every one of you to get three things: to get a copy of this Constitution, to get a dictionary, which you can find right on your phone also, in addition to the Constitution, and use your common sense and sit down at the dinner table with your friends over coffee. Start a little Constitution study. Start with just studying the preamble. As I said, I'm just here not as a professor, not as even as a law student. I'm just here as a fellow citizen and fellow member of humanity, trying to promote this idea that we all should be living by our Constitution and the preamble. If you'd like to get a copy of the Constitution, you can contact the ACLU, or you can contact me. I will send you one. I've ordered a number of them, and I give them out to people as gifts. So my name and my email address and my phone number are there. And that concludes my very humble and it was an honor and a privilege to share my enthusiasm for our preamble and our Constitution.
Well, Eileen, we want to thank you, and it was very informative, and I so appreciate it. And actually, next week I'm going into the Constitution in my class, so I might be hitting you up for some free especially when we get back on the campus. I might contact you to get, or the ACLU, and just start passing them out in classes.
Well, I only have 10 right now.
Yeah, okay.
But they come through, you can order them from the ACLU.
Okay.
They'll come in pretty quick.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our next speaker will be Dr. Gabino Aguirre. He will be talking about the Census 2020 and redistricting. Are you ready, Dr. Aguirre? Sir, we can't hear you. I see you talking. Still can't hear you. Try to say something. Yeah, we're not getting. Yeah, we're still not hearing anything. I would suggest you try to check your mic, or should we go to the next person and come back, Libby? Okay, Dr. Gary, we'll come back to you. What I will do is let Dr. Ramon Flores come in and talk about civic engagement. Dr. Gary, I would check the bottom of your computer where your microphone and your volume is, and make sure that's all connected. Thank you, sir. Dr. Flores, welcome. We'd love to hear you talk about civic engagement. Testing 1, 2, 3. Let's try that first.
Professor Callahan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the invitation. And good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Ramon Flores. I am a trustee on the Ventura County Board of Education. I currently serve as board president. I am in my 12th year as a trustee, meaning I'm about to finish my 3rd term. I pulled papers to run for a 4th term, and as luck would have it, I was unopposed at the filing deadline, which means I win a 4th term by affirmation. So 2 ways to look at that. Either my constituents think I'm doing such a good job, they're gonna let me run a 4th term, or they think the job is so hard, nobody wants it, but neither here nor there. That's a little bit of trustee humor there, guys, a little bit of humor. So let's talk about the County Board of Education, and we'll reference that to local school districts, because we're a little bit of an unknown commodity. So the state of California has 58 counties, and each county has a a county office of education that is governed by a county board of education. We're actually called out in the state constitution as an entity that must exist. We are a 5-member board. Up and down the state, there are some 7-member boards, but in Ventura County, we are 5 members, and we have the same trustee areas, jurisdiction areas, if you will, as the 5 supervisors and as the 5 community college trustees. So in my case, I represent Area 5, which is mainly Oxnard. So on the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Zaragoza and I have the same area, and on the community college, Trustee Gabriela Torres and I have the same voting area. We are responsible for a $115 million budget, and that is a big chunk of money. So one of the reasons I ran back in 08 was I'd like to be part of the conversation that has a say in where that money goes. And again, we can talk about the political process in a little bit, but a little bit more on the county board. What do we do that makes us different from, say, a local board? So we run our own set of schools. We are responsible for the court schools. So we have a school at the Juvenile Justice Center called Providence. And unfortunately, notoriously, if you're familiar with the Larry King murder at E.O. Green, the individual who shot that student was actually housed at the Juvenile Justice Center. And because he was eligible for public education, he actually graduated with his high school diploma from Providence, and then, as the law says, he went off to prison. We also run the community school over at the airport called Gateway, and these are for students that are expelled not just from their school, but from their entire district. So you can imagine the level of offense that they had to commit to get to that level. And then lastly, we run, not lastly, but second to lastly, we run the special education programs countywide. So again, we have a school that we just opened, brand new school called Trident Academy. It was at the airport. We moved to a brand new facility, the Mary Samples Education Center in Camarillo. And these are for kids, again, K through high school that are on the autism spectrum. We have a school called Phoenix for kids that have social emotional issues. And we have a bunch of other different schools for kids that have cognitive issues. What comes to mind is Dorothy Boswell School, not too far from Ventura College, just off of Day Road. These are typically students upwards of 22 years old, I believe is how we can take them, who have the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. Again, not their fault, but just how it is. But we want to teach them life skills, not necessarily academics, but how to read a bus schedule, how to make change, how to work a kitchen without hurting themselves. And then lastly, we're an appeals body for 3 main things. We are an appeals body for inter-district transfers. So quick example, if you are a student who goes to Buena, you want to go to Ventura High School, you would take that within your school district because that is one school district. But if you're at Buena and you want to go to, say, Newberry Park, those are 2 different school districts. And so if either district would deny the appeal, then the parents can come to us as an appeals body, and then we have final say. We are an appeals body, like I mentioned, for expulsions. And typically when students come to us, it's pretty severe offense. Again, won't go into details, but they're pretty severe offenses when they come to the county for appeal. And lastly, probably the biggest one is we are an appeals body for charter schools. And if you are following or familiar with charter schools, these are now a multi-million-dollar entity. And so there are a lot of organizations that will back candidates for county board positions simply to try to get a yes vote on the county board. A quick example, when I ran in 08, my campaign raised close to $10,000, for various expenses. I had a colleague in Orange County. You are familiar with the demographics of Orange County and the politics of Orange County. She was a longtime trustee, 24 years, very well respected. The charter school oppositions put a candidate and back that candidate to the tune of $400,000. So again, you can see how hard it would be to compete against $400,000 because charter schools are that big of a financial entity. There was a change in law recently where a petitioner could go to a local district with a charter school petition. If it was denied, it would come to us as the county board. If we denied it, it would go to the state board. Change in law now makes us the final say. So again, makes us in a very, from a decision-making perspective, a very important position. So that's kind of what a county board does. Libby, can you put up the map, please? So as Libby does that, one of the key themes that I wanted to leave with you is all politics is local politics. And I'll say that multiple times. So what Livy has put up, and then what at least I see on my screen, this is a map of Ventura County, and you see the 20 school districts in the county. And again, most people do not realize we actually have 20 different school districts, different flavors. We have a number of K-8 schools districts. We have one high school district, Oxford Union High School District, and then we have a number of of unified school districts, Ventura Unified being one, Fillmore Unified being another example, and then they vary in size. So I have the behemoth, Conejo Unified at 18,000. So again, as you would imagine, superintendent, 5 trustees, but then I also have Santa Clara. By last check, I think it was 62 students, 1 building. They have a superintendent, they have a board of trustees. Quick comparison, Ojai Unified has about 2,600 students in their school district. My 2 boys went to Pacifica High School. That one high school is about 3,100 kids. So it kind of gives you a perspective of the range. Now, why am I saying this? Well, each of these 20 districts is governed by a board of trustees. And school boards, if you may not know, make up the largest elected body in the nation. In Ventura County alone, 20 school districts, 5 trustees, that makes 100 elected officials that we have here. Quick comparison, we have 10 incorporated cities, so we have 10 mayors, which is great. We have 100 trustees. We outnumber them 10 to 1. We have, again, city council, about 5 per 50 council members. Even at 50 council members, the trustees, we outnumber them 2 to 1. We have 5 supervisors, again, 20 to 1 ratio. We have 2 assembly members, Jackie Irwin, Monique Limon. We have 1 state senator, Hannah Beth Jackson. We have 1 congresswoman compared to 100 trustees. So what does it mean to be an elected official in Ventura County? It is a tremendous power because we have a tremendous ability to influence change. We have a tremendous ability to influence policy. Again, quick example, because of my elected position and because of my background as an engineer, I was asked by then President of Cal State Channel Islands, Dr. Dick Rush, if I would join him up at Sacramento to the state legislature to help lobby for a mechatronics program at the university. Again, Ventura County has the Nemo-based Ventura County, largest employer in the county, and they hire, guess what, engineers. Well, we don't have an engineering school at Cal State Channel Islands. UCSB, Cal State Northridge are the 2 closest schools, but with some lobbying efforts, we were able to get funding to establish a mechatronics engineering program at the university. Again, sticking with influence, Congresswoman Jill Brownlee reached out to me personally and asked if I would be her delegated appointment to the California Democratic Convention, a huge responsibility that I could have had if I was a private citizen, but the fact that I'm already an elected official kind of gives me a little bit more weight and a little bit more credence. Again, want to focus that all politics is local politics. We have 100 trustees. What that does is allows us, because of our numbers, to influence policy. Through the California School Board Association, they are the lobbying agency for K-12 trustees. They have a advocacy day in Sacramento. I think it's either March or May, I keep forgetting. But this is where we have the ability to go up to Sacramento en masse. And we're very fortunate in Ventura County that we have legislatures, again, Monique Limon, Jackie Irwin, Hannah Beth Jackson, that are very, very pro-education. So when we show up, make appointments, you better believe they keep the appointments because they want to hear from us. They want to hear from our constituencies. That being said, we need to make sure we're prepared and we have the right ask of them because they're very, very busy. So again, all politics is local politics. One of the things that has frustrated me, because I sit at the county level and I have a county perspective, is when I see other races opening up for trustees in various school districts, and I reach out to various individuals who I think would make great candidates because they have great decision-making abilities. A lot of times the answer is no. because they like being a private citizen. As an elected official, as a trustee, my information, contact information is everywhere. Everybody has my phone number, my email, my home address. But by the same token, I chose that that path because, again, I wanted to be part of that conversation. As Aline mentioned, the Constitution is a very tremendous document. It gives us an awful lot of freedom, but it gives us an awful lot of responsibilities. And to me, one of the biggest ones is to make sure we have a well-educated society who can go out and make some of these very difficult decisions, whether it's voting for a particular proposition, voting for a particular candidate, or them themselves deciding to run for office. So I could talk a lot more. Let me kind of pause here for a minute, and I'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, we're gonna do questions at the very end. So once you wrap up, I can see if Dr. Aguirre's ready, and then we can get the next two people, and then people are gonna have questions, I'm sure.
Okay, let's turn over to Dr. Aguirre then.
Okay, Dr. Aguirre, can you hear me? No, we're still not hearing you. Okay, while Dr. Aguirre is trying to get his audio going, what I would like to do is go to the next person. I would want to thank Dr. Flores, and we're going to move along to Stephen Kluwer, who is from the Good Club, and he's going to talk about civic engagement. And Stephen, I hope I got your name right. If I mutilated it, please forgive me. You're up. Go ahead, sir.
Not to worry. There's not a whole lot of French-Canadian last names here. My name is Stephen Auclair, and I am a resident in Port Hueneme. I'm actually a community college graduate. I was a first-generation college student at Allen Hancock College up in Santa Maria, where I was involved in student government. I was a student trustee. So it's a great experience. I'm so happy that those that are attending this call, and many of you are involved in some leadership position in your community colleges. Community colleges here in the state actually provide very unique student leadership opportunities that actually aren't available in many colleges. So take advantage of those opportunities. Okay, there's my PSA. I'm also a graduate in student affairs. I have a master's degree from CSU Channel Islands. As mentioned earlier, I serve as president of the Greater Oxnard Organization of Democrats, also known as the Good Club. It's the largest club here in Ventura County with 320 club members. Of course, there are 50 Democrats. As Dr. Flores mentioned before, I am getting a little notification that my internet's cutting out, so I'm going to turn off.
Yeah, turn off your camera and see if it'll just go with just your voice, your audio.
Helps the audio.
Yeah.
Let me know if it helps.
Yeah.
Better. Okay, great. The president of the Oxnard Democrats, and I'm excited to be here. As Dr. Flores mentioned, there are so many local groups and elected bodies that you can be involved with. I'm actually on the Citizen Advisory Commission in the city of Port Hueneme. Those are available to, I think, almost anybody who's over 18. So please check out your local city commissions and how you can get involved. So just in Oxnard alone, just to go over school districts that often have oversight commissions and committees, we have Rio School District, Oxnard School District, Hueneme School District, Ocean View School District, Oxnard Union High School District, and of course our County Board of Education in the community college district. So it just shows you that there's so many ways to get involved. I think we often get distracted by national politics, which of course are important, but it comes all the way down to where you live and what you do. So my day job, though, is that I oversee what's called the coordinated campaign of the California Democratic Party here in Ventura County. And so what does that mean? That means, yes, of course, I'm involved in the national political races, but also altogether there are 48 local races that I am supporting in every city in the county. So it gives me kind of a lot of perspective into what's going on in our county, what's important at the very grassroots level, water district, school board, etc. But what I wanted to emphasize with you all is that it's so important to know where you align on the political spectrum. So I'm going to put in the chat actually a nonpartisan tool that we used when I was in social sciences, and that is through the Pew Research Center. It's a political typography inventory. Some of you have taken this for, career paths and whatnot. And that'll just give you a hint of where you might align politically, whether that's in my party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, maybe one of the minor parties, such as the Libertarian and Green parties, or maybe no party at all. That's possible here in this state. It's known as no party preference or decline to state. What I've done to help students in this county get you involved is we've launched a fellowship program that's open to any person in the county that you can apply. You can reach out to me for that. And then finally, I just wanted to note 2 propositions that are on the ballot here in November. Actually, your ballots will be coming out starting October 2nd here in the county. But I wanted to point out Proposition 17 and 18. Those have to do with voting. Prop 17 would restore voting rights to those who are on parole. So they had their voting rights removed and can now be restored if you vote yes on 17. That's about 50,000 eligible voters that could have their voter eligibility restored. And then finally, Prop 18 would allow 17-year-olds to vote in primaries as long as they're 18 by the time they were in the general elections. So think about when you were in senior year of high school, or perhaps an early college student, and you were 17 at the time of our March primary. This would have allowed you to vote as long as you were 18 by the time the general election rolled around. So I'll leave it there, but there's some tool that's free in the chat, and hand it off.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen, so much. Really appreciate it. Now we have Dr. Aguirre. I believe he's back. Stephen did put the link in the chat. Dr. Aguirre, can you hear me, sir? We still can't hear you yet. Yeah, nope, still not hearing you, sir. That's the one thing about technology, everybody. Yeah, we're still not hearing it. So what I will do is go over to the Betsy Patterson with the League of Women Voters, I believe. Is that correct? Betsy? Okay, yeah, so we have Betsy Patterson, the League of Women Voters. I think they are just the best group of people. I've dealt with them over the years for counting elections, and so I'm so grateful that you're here, Betsy. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much. Libby, will you be able to let me be a co-host so I can share my screen at some point? I will go ahead and start without that. Yes, I'm Betsy Patterson. I am president of our local League of Women Voters, the League of Women Voters of Ventura County. And I am here to talk with you a little bit about what to expect in the November election, and to get you prepared so that you will be an informed and effective voter. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Let's see how that works. Yes, that'll stop sharing that screen, and we'll go with this one. Okay, so first of all, I just want to point out that this is our 100th anniversary of women being granted the right to vote by the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. It is also the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters of the United States being formed after women obtained the right to vote. And the suffragists realized, well, now we have a large group of women who can vote, and we should work on educating voters so that they understand about the elections and about learning about the candidates and the issues. So hence the League of Women Voters was founded. And I just note here that Susan B. Anthony and her colleagues began the fight for the right to vote in 1847, taking 72 years to obtain that right. Persistence, that's one of women's characteristics. But moving on, what's new for our election this 2020, specifically in Ventura County? The state of California for this entire election will be a vote by mail election, which means that everyone who is a registered voter in California will receive their official ballot in the mail. And as was mentioned earlier, they start sending them out in Ventura County on October 2nd. They won't all get sent out because there are 475,000 registered voters in Ventura County. And so over the following few days, they will be sent out. In addition, instead of having just a single day for election, of election day, and polling places look open all throughout the county, this election will have early voting opportunities. The ballots can be returned by mail. As soon as you've received it and completed your ballot, it can be returned by mail. It can be dropped off in one of 34 drop boxes throughout the county, or you can vote in person at the vote centers, which will be open for 3 days before Election Day, as well as on Election Day. So what's actually coming in the mail to you? I think this is maybe helpful to know that this is what the envelope will look like. It's a very eye-catching envelope. It's got a I voted by mail picture of the sticker that'll be inside. But what's inside this envelope? Well, your ballot, of course, and your ballot will be filled out by filling in the circles. No longer do we have to draw a line between two boxes. It's just fill in the circle. In addition, there will be instructions on how to mark your ballot, as well as the sticker that says I have voted, or I voted by mail. What else? So this is probably the most important part of it. This is the official ballot return envelope. It is purple rather than blue. And the most important part of this envelope is the backside, whereas there is a place for you to sign your name. That is where the signature goes that they will use to match with the official signature that they have on record in the elections office. If you do not sign this envelope on the back, there's no way that they're going to be able to count your ballot. So that's why signing the ballot, or signing the back of the envelope, you don't sign the ballot, you sign the envelope that you put your ballot in and date it and then print your name and address. That is important. People worry about, oh, well, maybe my signature's changed. Well, don't worry. If you've had any dealings with the DMV, they have signatures from you. The elections office has multiple signatures. If you've ever voted, when you signed in to vote, they have that signature. So they have a way of checking and making sure this is your official signature. And if they have any questions, if the machine spits it out, a real human being looks at the signature and tries to analyze with some training that they've had, whether this is actually your official signature. If they're not sure, a second person looks. If that person can't decide, a supervisor looks. If all three of them have trouble deciding whether this is your official signature, they will then mail you a letter requesting you return a letter that has your signature on it, that you sign the form and return it to them so they can verify that this is your ballot. This is one of the many ways they have of protecting the vote and making sure that everybody has who's registered has an opportunity to vote, but only once. You can't vote multiple times, despite what some people may think. In addition, if you want to have someone else return your ballot, there's a space up here on the left upper corner where you can authorize someone to return your ballot. You must write their name in and have them sign it, and just talk about what kind of relationship they are. They don't have to be a blood kin. They can be your next door neighbor. They could be the Meals on Wheels delivery person. They could be a caregiver, anything, but you need to fill that in and they have to sign it. Okay, that's the back of that envelope. So our voting options for this election, and this only applies for this election in November. Ventura County is not going completely to a vote by mail system at this point yet. So your options are, you can put it back in the US Postal Service mailbox. You can take it to the post office. You can return it by mail. You can also drop it off in one of the many drop boxes that they have. There are 14 permanent drop boxes because there are 3 actually at the Government Center, 2 near the Hall of Administration and then 1 outside the Hall of Justice. And they are the big white boxes that are outdoors, and they are permanent. In addition, they actually have, I think it's actually 19 temporary drop boxes that will be around the county, spread around the county based on population centers. And these will be indoors and will be open basically during the business hours of those businesses. Finally, the third way of voting is to vote in person at the vote centers. And there will be 47 vote centers around the county that will be open on October 31st, which is Saturday, then Sunday, November 1st, and then Monday, November 2nd, from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. And then finally on Election Day, open the usual hours, which is not what this picture says, but from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. So here is a picture of some of the drop boxes, and you'll see that our Harry T. Byrne, our voter bear, who is traveling around the county to find these drop boxes, is posted here at the Camarillo and the Thousand Oaks and the Oxnard Public Library. The permanent drop boxes are located at city government or city facilities, like the library. It's also in Fillmore. It's at the public library or at the city halls. And then, as I mentioned, this is what the temporary drop boxes look like. And the location of these drop boxes is now available at venturavote.org. You can go onto their the local elections office or elections division's website and scroll down a little bit, and you'll say drop box locations and in-person locations. So they've actually finally designated where those locations will be. The last little thing I wanted to mention is that you can track your ballot for this election. It's you need to sign up ahead of time at where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov, and you can opt to have them send you emails or a text message of where your ballot is along the process. In Ventura County, they have opted for the most detailed following. So you will get a notification when the elections office has sent out your ballot. You'll get a notification when the US Postal Service has sent it out for delivery to your house. So you should know that the ballot should be arriving in the next day or so. You will get a notification when if you mail it back, when the post office has processed it for being delivered to the elections office. You'll get a notification when the election office has received it. They will then process the outside envelope to make sure the signature matches their on-record signature. And then they will separate the ballot from the envelopes to be ready to count the ballots after the poll, the vote centers and election ends on November 3rd at 8 p.m. And then you will get a notification of when your ballot has been counted. So it's great detail, and it's very useful because if they have mailed out the ballot and you have not gotten it, you can then call and ask for a replacement ballot. And these are some important dates that you might want to mark on your calendar. So the ballots will be mailed out starting October 2nd. Not all of them will go out that day, but the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, they should be getting into the mail system. The drop boxes, I didn't put that on this slide, but the drop boxes will be open and available to deposit your ballot on October 6th, which means that the little slot where you put the ballot in or the envelope in will be unlocked. The rest of the drop box is locked. The drop boxes get emptied Monday through Friday by 2 election staff workers who pick up the ballots, take them back to the elections office for them to be processed. Over the weekend, they don't pick them up, so it's Monday through Friday, but starting October 6th, you can drop off your ballot in any drop box throughout the county. If by October 15th, you have not received your official ballot in the mail, you may call the elections division and request a second ballot to be sent. If for some reason a ballot arrives the next day and then you get another ballot 3 days later, the elections office will only count the ballot that they received first. So you can't vote twice by filling out 2 ballots, just the way it works. If you are going to mail your ballot, we are recommending that you mail it at least 2 weeks before Election Day to assure that it gets delivered in time. October 19th is the last day that you can register to get your ballot mailed to you, but you can register to vote at the elections division office anytime. And then once the vote centers are open, you can register to vote and vote the same day at any of those vote centers. So as I mentioned, October 31st, November 1st, and November 2nd, there's early voting at the vote centers. And again, these vote centers are countywide. If you live in Ojai and you work in Thousand Oaks, you can go to a vote center in Thousand Oaks and get a ballot that's appropriate for what the election is for your address in Ojai at that Thousand Oaks vote center. And then again on November 3rd, the vote centers will be open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. One thing to note is that for California, and this is California only, each state gets to decide how they run their elections. California has decided to allow any ballot that is postmarked on or before November 3rd to be received and counted as long as it arrives at the elections office by November 20th. So that's 17 extra days after Election Day that mailed ballots will be received and counted. And as a result of that, there will not be final election results available on election night. It may take 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks to actually get the final results. So if you share any important information with your friends and families, tell them don't worry about hanging out on the TV on election night to find out who's won all of these elections, because those will not be final results. The election office here in Ventura County and all the counties in California must certify their election results by December 5th. So that includes getting verification of somebody's signature. If they are not sure it matched, they get it sent back to them. All of that has to be done, and the final count has to be certified by December 5th. So you can say by December 5th, we should have an idea of who won our elections.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry, Betsy, were you still going?
Yeah, I was. I just have a couple more slides real quick.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Okay, because we're slow for time because it's supposed to be over by 1 o'clock. So
oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Another speaker, so please go ahead.
One last slide, just because it's important to be an informed voter, and the League has always traditionally put on candidate forums and pros and cons for the ballot propositions, and we will be doing this virtually, and you can find the schedules for those on our website at lwvventuracounty.org. These other 2 items, Voter's Edge and Ballotpedia, are 2 nonpartisan resources for finding out about candidates and issues. And with that said, I just want you to vote.
Yes, that's so important. And I do apologize. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll stop sharing my screen.
I know that's the worst part of being a moderator. You have to like tell people, okay, your time is up. So, Dr. Geary, can you hear me, sir?
And So, I mean, Dr. Aguirre, if you want to begin speaking, I'll hold the phone up to the computer. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, really good. Yes, we do.
Oh yes, we love this. Okay, let me just okay, here we go. So thank you for inviting me to this presentation. I apologize for the technical hangups. My name is Dr. Gabino Aguirre. I'm presently working with Ventura County Community Foundation on the Census 2020 campaign. So I appreciated all the information that was provided by Ken and Gisela and others on the call. And I just wanted to mention that in the effort to not prolong this too much, I'll just be focusing on redistricting. So here it goes. Of course, redistricting is a process that is contested every 10 years. So redistricting is an essential but inescapably controversial element of the political process. The redrawing of district boundaries has profound effects on the landscape of electoral politics, whether those boundaries involve congressional districts for the House of Representatives, legislative districts for state chambers and houses, or the array of districts drawn for cities, counties, and other local government bodies. District lines can determine who decides to run for office, who is more likely than not to win a legislative seat, how the balance of power is divided among elected officials, and consequently, how public policy is developed within a legislative body. District lines also delimit the political strength of voters within those districts, and lines that dilute the power of minority voting blocks can infringe upon rights guaranteed by the federal Constitution and statutes such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The infrequency of redistricting is a process that typically occurs within 1 or 2 years of each decennial census, means that the stakes are even higher because boundaries are locked in place for 10 years, a full decade. So in this scenario, then I applied to be on the Citizens Redistricting Commission in 2009 and was selected out of 38,000 folks, applicants, to be one of 14 members on that independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, the first of its kind virtually. So, so how did that happen? So, well, there was a lengthy vetting process for all those 38,000 applicants, and eventually it got down to a pool of about 64 individuals. And then at that time, that pool was sent to both legislative houses here in California, and the politicians, and this was the only time that politicians got involved in this process. Politicians then could strike folks that they didn't even have to give a reason. Of those 64, they struck a certain number of individuals off those lists, and then we were left with a pool of 36. So of those 36, then they put balls with numbers inside this, kind of like a bingo ball kind of contraption, and turned it, and they pulled out the first 8. And those first 8 then, in turn, then looked at the ethnicity, gender, the demographics of each individual, geographic distribution, et cetera, and then they looked at the members of the remaining pool, and they selected the final 6. So now we have 14 members, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 other. So none of us knew anything about drawing maps. However, we all had and this was part of the application process, we had to show that we had an appreciation of the geographic and demographic diversity of California, that we were impartial, that and that we had quote unquote strong analytical skills. So we walked into a situation at that time where it was hostile territory. The Democrats were not in favor of redistricting, being that they were in power, right? And of course, the Republicans who had started out in promoting redistricting as a way of saving the Republican Party here in California, that decided that given the diversity of our commission, that things might not go the way that they expected them to go. So the history of redistricting here in California, the prior 3 decades was, you know, in 2000 there was a sweetheart deal between the Democrats and the Republicans, where they and this, you know, they is backdoor politics. They kind of made a sweetheart deal where Republicans looked at their Democrats and said, okay, we know you're strong in those districts, so you can have those, and the other party said, we know that you're strong in those areas, so you can have those. So nothing changed. As a result of that, then we entered into gridlock where you know, gerrymandering was reared its ugly head, and the state wasn't getting anything done, and that was because of that kind of gridlock that came. So there was one district referred to as a ribbon of shame, for example, in terms of gerrymandering, which is the drawing of districts to favor yourself as a candidate or your political party. And this ribbon of shame stretched from San Francisco, from San Mateo County down to Ventura along the coast. And in some places, it was about 350 miles long, this one district out of 53. And this district in some places was no wider than the freeway. And and it captured all of the wealthy communities along the coast. So this one representative in Congress was a shoo-in. Every time they ran for election, they were elected. So anyway, so we came into the process looking at what can we do, and initially we thought, well, you know, Republicans, Democrats, it's going to be a bloodbath and all of this. But to my surprise, what I found was that there were 14 individuals that were committed to the mission, and they moved forward. And over time, we did what we could to redraw 173 political districts here in California, congressional, state, and state. So, you know, of course, redistricting here in California was passed through Proposition 11, which barely passed 51 to 49. In fact, it was much closer than that. And that was to redraw the state offices here in California. And then there was in 2010 then another proposition, Proposition 20, that sought to include the redrawing of congressional districts, and that passed with a much higher percentage, 61% to 39%. But interestingly, at that time, there was another proposition on the ballot to do away with the commission even before it started. So, and that was handily defeated by 53 to 47. So, whereas we had just been selected as a commission, with this proposition, we didn't even know whether we were going to be implementing this. So, we moved forward, and we had to engage the community. So we struck out in traveling throughout California, and we had 34 public hearings. We listened to over 2,700 speakers that provided input on redistricting for their particular areas. We had 70 deliberation or business meetings, and we asked the public to give us their ideas on how they would like their districts to be drawn, and we received over 22,000 of those suggestions in the mail. Our meetings were live streamed. They were recorded. They were in various languages, and one of the criteria for carrying out our meetings was to be totally transparent. So as a result of our work then, people ask us, well, was one of the criteria to develop more competitiveness? And frankly, we didn't go there with competitiveness because we were barred from looking at incumbents' districts or candidates' districts or any voting data to draw these districts. So we were blind, so to speak, to this political consideration. So, however, as a result of redistricting in 2012, our districts were drawn in 2011, and they were used for the 2012 election. In the results from the 2012 election showed that out of 80 assembly persons in the state house, that 38 of them had changed hands or changed party. So even though competitiveness was not one of our criteria in drawing districts, one of the results was this. Of course, simultaneous to that was the top two proposition where, the primaries were open to the top two vote getters or in irregardless of what their political party might be. So anyway, so we moved forward with this, and we were challenged in court. We were taken to the Supreme Court challenging the maps that we had drawn, and we prevailed with the Supreme Court twice. We prevailed in Superior Court once, and we passed muster with the district, the Department of Justice. In their VRA districts. There were 4 counties here in California that had to be redrawn following very strict VRA criteria. So overall, we asked, there was a study that was done about, what the public thought about our work, and overall, the voters approved the work of our commission 2-1 in regards to the transparency of the process. We got an A. The California Supreme Court upholded our state Senate maps, which is one of the challenges that went to the Supreme Court. 7 justices that were primarily Republican appointments voted 7-0 in our favor. And then we got wide praise from independent reviewers. We also received an award from Harvard University's School of Government, the Ash Center, as being the most innovative civic engagement project in the country. And so besides receiving this accolade, we also received a prize of $100,000. And these $100,000 then were to be used for us to travel throughout the United States by request of states to help inform their redistricting efforts within their own states. So for the last two and a half years, these 14 members of the commission then, we've been traveling around the United States, doing presentations on what redistricting is, how we did it, what the results were, and then just provided them a model that they might be able to use, and then open up for questions. And although we have the initiative and referendum process here in California, which made possible the Proposition 11 and Proposition 20 and 27 being placed on the ballot by the public here in California, less than half of the states have that initiative process in place. In most states, what we found was that, of course, that redistricting was occurred the way that it had previously occurred here in California. Backdoor deals, the party in power being able to draw the districts in their favor, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really been an eye-opener for me traveling around the country and seeing just how progressive California is. And so as I speak now, right today, the Commission 2020, we were in the 2010 Commission, the 2020 Commission, the members, applicants are being vetted right now, and as I understand it, they have selected the first 8, and those 8 are deliberating on selecting the other 6. So, hearkening back to 2010, here we were using 2010 data to draw these districts. So, to the extent that people participated in the census in 2010, then we drew those districts with those figures and that data to drive it. So to the extent that people did not participate, then of course they aren't, quote unquote, being adequately or even symbolically represented in Washington or the State House. So again, getting back to the information that was presented on the census, and to the extent that people participate in the census this year, then it's will determine what kind of political representation we have here in Ventura County and in Region 5, which is part of a census, 10 districts here in California. And so I just find it kind of interesting that I kind of came full circle from working with data to then, trying to organize the community to make sure that we have a full count of every resident here in this area. So I kind of rushed through that presentation, given that we're almost 20 minutes over. So I appreciate the opportunity, and if there's any questions, I can take those at this time.
Okay, actually, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to actually just open up for a couple questions. We have gone over, so I'm not going to be rude, but I'm going to keep everybody on a time limit. So because we saw that at the beginning, we had about 35, 40 people now, because people have to get back to their off time. So anybody have any questions before we wrap this up? I actually did have one for Ken though. So, and thank you, Betsy, for uploading your, and actually I'm gonna see if I can have you come to my class and explain that to my students too. But Ken, my question about the census, because you were talking about the census earlier, correct?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the census, it's based on allocation of funds. Is that correct? Yes or no? I just wanted to know because I had a debate in a class with a student over census, and he said it's not about funding. I said it's literally about funding. It comes down to funding. Also, that's why they count heads as well as our state house, as well as the Congress, allocation of electoral votes and seats in Congress, but also it's about funding, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a whole bunch of different federal agencies that use the census count to distribute federal dollars for just tons of programs.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions to ask any of our guest speakers? Yes, Eileen, go ahead.
Professor Gamboa, is the Great Law of Peace still in effect among the Native American nations?
Yes, the Haudenosaunee Nation is a sovereign nation to this day. They have their own passports and their own government.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Well,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Lisa Marie. I was waiting for you.
I have a question for Betsy. Did I hear right or did I hear wrong? We need a witness to sign when we sign our envelopes?
No. You do not need a witness to sign your envelope to return your ballot. It's only if you are going to hand it to someone else to return for you. That you have them sign the envelope saying that you have given it to them, and they are authorized to return it. So no, you do not have to have anybody witness you signing your envelope.
Okay, so if I was going to take them for my son and daughter, then I sign it on top of after their signature?
Okay, in the upper left corner, there's a box that says to the person from the person who is filling out the ballot, I have given my ballot to your name to return and your signature and how you're related to them. My mom.
Thank you.
That was a good question. Thank you, Lisa Marie. Now, we are going to have to wrap up. On behalf of Dr. Hoffman and all of Ventura College, Libby, the Associated Students of Ventura College, Lisa Marie Collin, all you guys, we want to thank all of our guest speakers. You guys have a great day. Stay covered up. There's still COVID-19, so stay covered and, wash your hands and all that great stuff. And Betsy, you'll be hearing from me because I really want you to come talk to my class. You guys have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Callahan and Professor
everyone.
Gamboa and everybody else. I appreciate you participating.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation.
Yes, it was. It was really informative. There was things I didn't know. So thank you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. We really appreciate it. You guys gave great presentations.
Yes, thank you.